We have a new body horror film that takes the audience through a journey of an aging celebrity, and trust me when I say I've never seen a film like this before. But the question is, does this new body horror film have something new to say about the genre, about the standards, the beauty standards that are held on women, and is this film worth checking out? Well, we'll be discussing that and much more in today's spoiler-free review of
This is The Substance.
But first, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Was this a film you all were looking forward to checking out? And more importantly, once you have seen this film, let me know your thoughts, your pros, your cons, thoughts on the direction, the story, the performances, that ending. Did it work? Did it not work? And is this one of the most disgusting body horror films that you have seen? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Elisabeth Sparkle, renowned for her aerobics show, faces a devastating blow on her 50th birthday as her boss fires her. Amid her distress, a laboratory offers her a substance which promises to transform her into an advanced version of herself. So for months now, I have been hearing nothing but great things about this movie. Some people calling it one of the best films of the year, one of the best body horror films of all time, one of the best horror films of the year. So listen, if you know me, I love science fiction. And when you take a cool science fiction concept like this film has and you inject it into the horror genre, I was sold. My anticipation was through the roof, and here we are talking about it. Is it worth checking out? Well, let's get into it. Coming from French filmmaker and screenwriter and following up on her 2017 action thriller film by the name of Revenge, after seeing that film and now this, Coralie Fargeat is one of the most interesting directors working today in my opinion. She clearly has an interest in exploring the raw power of women and uses the female body as a tool of power. You can see her inspiration throughout this very insane journey of one battling against the age, and you can see inspirations from great directors like David Cronenberg or John Carpenter, all known for their body horrors, but her specificity with showcasing the human body and highlighting scenes that do have nudity and the way they use the close-up shots, she makes it feel so internal and extremely vulnerable, but also powerful, and her craftsmanship is just off the charts. Now, putting the story aside for a second, which we'll get into the story in this review without spoiling anything, but just talking about from a visual perspective, this film is incredibly made. From the use of color, the camera angles, the way the sets are made, and felt like I was watching something out of a Stanley Kubrick film, all things that elevate the film and immerse you as an audience deeper into the psyche of these characters in the story. Also have to take a moment to highlight the incredible sound design, the sound effects, and the score of this film just brings this non-stop energy and just brings life into the movie. Now, speaking as a horror fan and just talking about the body horror in this film, which is incredible, what an incredible use of practical effects and the way the film kind of zooms in on certain shots and how it displays the horrific moments of seeing these characters' bodies change over time was just simply amazing, but yet truly disgusting at the same time. Now, while this is truly a singular experience, I really love how I was able to see themes from films that I love, such as more recent like Poor Things or The Thing or The Fly, meets the fear of aging from concepts like Pearl or Barbarian. Now, if you put all those films in a blender, it bursts this very trippy and unique and gross experience of this film. Now, speaking from a story perspective, the core of this film is tackling the idea of how society holds ridiculous beauty standards for women. This to me is weirdly enough a cautionary tale that reminded me of the story of Dorian Gray. We see how our main character Elizabeth is so afraid of aging and doesn't want to be forgotten that she is willing to take this black market drug to create this younger version of herself, all at the cost of her own mental sanity. We also explore different themes like how it plays into the women being their own worst enemy or their own worst nightmare. Also, we have this idea of feeling replaced by the youth, and there's just so many other things that I just don't want to give away that I love as a science fiction fan but also a horror fan, and how they blended together in such a odd and strange way just made this experience so unique. Now, as far as the performances go, we really only have like three main characters that we focus on, starting off with Dennis Quaid, who plays a Hollywood executive by the name of Harvey, which you can imagine is a play on Harvey Weinstein as the inspiration. And Dennis, the way he plays his character, he plays a scumbag pretty damn well in this film. Like every time you see him, from his teeth, his costume, the way he was eating that shrimp, all disgusting, a very terrible individual, but a good performance by Dennis Quaid. Transitioning over to someone I've been a big fan of for a very long time, and that is Margaret Qualley. Ever since I saw her in The Leftovers, I have just been a fan of all of her work. Now, she doesn't have a ton of dialogue in the film, nor does this film just have a lot of dialogue in general, but she still delivers a performance that is nothing short of mesmerizing. Now, the character's beauty is the focus, and her body and her usefulness is the character itself, but there is just this primal raw energy that she brings to her character at a certain point, and she nailed that performance. She commands the screen, leaving a lasting impression with every single time she's on the screen. But to now put a focus on the star of this film, who hit the scene in the 80s, was very popular in the 90s, like a mega star in the 90s, kind of disappeared in the 2000s, but still stayed relevant. We're talking about the one and only Demi Moore. To me, this is such a perfect role for her because at the age of 61 and in the landscape of how Hollywood looks at people at a certain age, she is considered old as far as Hollywood standards, and this story and her character just fits so perfectly. Demi Moore is just phenomenal in this role, again, being who she is in real life and how that plays into her character, a character who's grappling with being forgotten and undervalued, even though she still is incredibly beautiful. And the idea of this character thinking younger is better, and seeing Demi go through the process and seeing her physically vulnerable on screen in this role as she just bears it all. There's a particular scene that she's in this film that takes place in a bathroom as she's getting ready for a date, and I'll talk about it more in my criticisms, but the film doesn't have many moments of sympathy for any of the characters, but that is a moment I highlight as far as you see the character having a moment where as an audience I felt for the character, and again the performance in that scene, again Demi Moore is just so great in this role, and I think again knowing that she's 61 in real life and still looks incredibly flawless, you can't help but to draw parallels between her character and her own real life. Again, the casting is simply genius. Now, a couple last points I want to mention before getting into my criticisms, and I think this is a big talking point with this film, and that is the ending. Now, I won't spoil anything, but I'll just say for myself, I'm still kind of 50-50 on the ending. But to speak on the positives of it all, this to me hits the extreme levels and boldness it takes, mixed with incredible practicality in the last half of the film. I love that element in terms of the body horror. It's one of the most well-executed sequences I've seen this year. The design, the gore, all of it is just masterfully done. I'm telling you all, the last 25 minutes is some of the most over-the-top, most disgusting scenes you'll see all year. It had shades of or Evil Dead 2013 or even Scanners. The ending is something I will never forget. Now, with all that being said, there are elements about this movie that kept it from being great in my eyes. So let's get into my criticisms that I have for the movie. And I want to start off first with my nitpicks. Again, this doesn't affect my score. It's just something that kind of stood out to me, or it was like in the back of my head while I was watching this. As I mentioned, I'm a huge fan of science fiction. I love it. It's my favorite genre. And I love when you have a science fiction concept like we have in this film. Again, you have this idea of you taking this drug that creates a better, younger version of yourself. There's all these rules that kind of apply to it, like how you take the medicine. You have to switch every 7 days between the younger you and the real you, and I just love the concept. But again, the nerd in me as far as like exploring ideas and really diving into the minutia of certain things and getting more details, they don't really explain that much of the drug, like who invented it, where it comes from, who's all behind it. And there's a level of like something that I wish the film would have explored more is the idea of like concept. The drug doesn't really help the user. Like it's obviously a play on like drugs, like overusing a drug. When you see the film, you know what I'm talking about. But it doesn't really dive into the idea of like, when you really think about it, it doesn't help the user because I don't want to give too much away, but they're not sharing a similar consciousness, right? There are memories that the better you has, but you don't really see what they're doing or what the older versions you were doing because, again, you're not like connected mentally throughout that experience. So I'm like, what's really the benefit of the drug? And I wish the film would have like dove a little bit deeper into the psychology of like why someone would take the drug, because there's really not that much benefits for the user because you're kind of getting forgotten. And again, I don't want to give too much away, but that's, again, just a little nitpick that came to mind. But putting that aside, talking more about the criticisms that did bother me while watching this movie. First thing that comes to mind, this movie did not need to be almost 2.5 hours. I look at the repetitiveness in the second act of the film. It's a bit slow. It's a little bit uninteresting at points. And we're switching off between Sue and Elisabeth. And I feel like there was a missed opportunity to not really explore more from Sue's perspective. Now, switching gears and talking a little bit about the tone, which I did think for the most part the tone did work. But there were moments where I would label this as like a dark comedy, satire on the subject matter. But then sometimes it got into campy nature. nature. And I like camp comedy, and again, comedy subjective. Switching into the campiness and the wackiness of it all, sometimes it kind of took me out of the movie. I compare it to, again, super awesome, amazing concept from the science fiction genre that has like shades of like you were watching like a Black Mirror episode, but it was like shot and formatted for like an SNL skit. Like, again, the tone for the most part was consistent, but when the tone did shift too much to the campiness, it kind of took me out of those moments. Now, in the same vein of sticking with the tone of this film, but more on the characteristics of the people that were presented, it was just way too extreme. Like, there are no actual people in this movie. They're just stereotypes with no individuality or personalities or actual relationships or actual real conversations. Pun intended when I say this, but the substance was missing from a lot of the certain characters and how they were portrayed and treated. The last points I want to mention here in my criticisms, and I kind of alluded to this in my positives, but it's the idea of sympathizing with our main character, Elisabeth. Now, like I mentioned, there's a scene in the bathroom that was the one moment where I like actually felt for the character, but the entry point in which we're introduced to this character, there isn't that much time spent with the character. Like, she's like really jumping into the substance program really early. So as an audience, you don't know if she's a good person, a bad person. What did she do to get to this position of her life? Did she sacrifice time with her friends and family to become this person that she is? So there isn't a level of sympathy that I had for the character. You're just kind of like, okay, this is just happening. I guess I should feel bad because she's older and the way Hollywood's treating her, but they don't spend that much time on really diving into the complexities of the character that I wish would have explored a lot more. But also, speaking of just kind of characters within this movie, I will say, like, I personally felt this movie needed another supporting character to really root things in reality, because this is very much a almost fantastical world, if you ask me. Like, I think this film needed a friend or a partner or some type of family member to really make things feel more real, because again, everything is just so heightened or over exaggerated. And again, I know that's the point of what the film is going for, but I wish they could have just found a better way to make it feel more real and grounded and rooted in reality. I want to go back to my 50-50 feelings on the ending of the film. Again, no spoilers, but I felt like the commentary lacked subtlety, especially when it comes to the end. Like, I felt like the film went against what it was doing in the first two acts of the movie, with challenging the viewers to see the extremes of the beauty standards required of women through the world or through the lens of Hollywood, and the Hollywood way of the male gaze is wrong. But then it morphs into exploiting stereotypes of women who are afraid of becoming old. And the way the film phrases the old term, they make it like it's gross and their bodies are gross. And they create this monstrous character at a certain point. And I just don't know what exactly it's trying to say. So again, I love the body horror in the third act and then all the stuff that comes with it as far as like from a visual perspective. But from a narrative perspective, I'm like, isn't that contradicting what the whole film was building up to? So I just feel like the execution on the narrative ending is the 50-50 part of me. Again, it looks good, but it doesn't come out, it's not conveyed or executed in a way that I thought it kind of fit within the story. So those are my main pros. Those are one of my nitpicks that I mentioned, and also my criticisms that I have for the film. So before I give you all my overall thoughts on my score, I want to take this time to thank you all for making it to this point in the video. Do me a favor, if you enjoyed yourself so far, hit the thumbs up. Also, make sure to share your thoughts about the movie in the comments below, but also consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. Overall, the production aesthetic and the practical effects of this insane body horror movie left me in awe, making it one of the most bizarre movies I've ever seen. The inevitability of aging is depicted in such a unique and grotesque manner that will leave you feeling nauseous while watching. Demi Moore is sensational, while Margaret Qualley demonstrates why she's one of the most bold actresses working today. Now, even though I struggle with the film's lack of subtlety and the fact that most of the characters didn't act like real people or the extreme stereotypes, there's no denying how much of an unforgettable experience this was, and that third act is straight up bonkers, and it's one that I'm still kind of processing. But with that being said, I'm gonna give The Substance a 3.5 out of 5. Like I said up top, I had high expectations for this film, and it didn't quite hit those expectations. And even though this is one of my things, I like to leave expectations at the door before I watch a movie, but again, I just saw the potential of it really kind of elevating itself into one of the best films of the year, which I don't think it's that, and I understand why some people might look at it that light, but it just didn't hit those marks for me. But still, with all that being said, go see this film. By the time this review is out, it will be in theaters on September 20th. So if you are into body horror, if you're into horror, if you're into movies that have a lot to say in regards to beauty standards for women and just what it means to be a woman and aging and all that stuff, give this film a chance. You will not be disappointed from, again, a horror, body horror perspective. But again, some of the narrative just didn't really add up to me. But definitely give this movie a watch. And when you do, we got to talk about it in the comments below. Pros, cons, and everything in between. Thank you all again for watching today's review. You all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.